I didn't mean to overhear it. I was just coming down the hallway with a basket of clean towels when Ivy's voice sliced through the closed bedroom door. I'm not staying with a broke man. I'd rather be alone than tied to failure. The words didn't shake. They were polished, final, like she'd been practicing them. I stopped mid-step. The hallway light flickered above me, but I didn't move. I waited for Eli to say something, anything, but silence settled, like ash. A week ago, he'd brought her home from the hospital, pale and fragile, wrapped in the same cardigan I gave her last Christmas. He held her like glass. We thought it was remission, a second chance. He sold his truck for the last treatment. His tools went next. Then his savings. I watched him chip away pieces of himself with each desperate decision. And now she was divorcing him because he had nothing left. I went back to the kitchen and laid the towels on the counter. My hands trembled, but I didn't cry. There's something about the way silence fills a house during moments like that. It's louder than shouting. Ivy left before dinner. She didn't say goodbye, just rolled a suitcase over my clean floor and closed the door behind her. Eli came into the kitchen after she was gone. He looked at the leftovers on the stove but didn't touch them. His eyes were red around the edges. He opened the fridge, closed it again. Then he sat down, rubbing his face like someone trying to wake up from something they couldn't believe was real. She says, I changed, he mumbled. Said I used to dream bigger. Now all I do is survive. He didn't look at me when he said it. Just stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. I poured him a glass of water and set it down without a word. He didn't drink it. Just nodded eyes still on the table. That night he packed a single bag and moved back into his old room. Eli moved through the house like a shadow, quiet, careful not to leave a trace. He left his duffel by the door and walked straight to the back room without saying a word. I heard the creak of the old mattress as he sat down, then nothing for hours. I didn't ask him anything that first night. Just left a clean towel on the bathroom counter and put on a fresh pot of coffee, though I knew he wouldn't drink it. The next morning, I found him still in the same clothes, slouched over the kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from a cup he hadn't touched. I offered to make eggs, and he shook his head. He tried to smile, but couldn't quite finish it. He'd always been the boy who couldn't sit still, who talked with his hands and stayed up late sketching ideas for his workshop. But now he barely moved. He showered late in the day, sometimes not at all. Ate when I set something in front of him, though never more than a few bites. He said little. And when he did speak, it was as if he wasn't talking to me at all. She used to say I made her feel safe, he said once out of nowhere. Now she says I make her feel stuck. I nodded, but he wasn't looking for answers. He just needed to let the words live outside his head. At night, I passed by his door and heard him whispering to himself, not praying, not sobbing, just whispering over and over. How could she leave after everything the house had known grief before, when my husband died, when Eli broke his leg and missed graduation? But this was different. This was something that didn't limp or bleed. It just drained the color out of him one day at a time. I started folding his laundry again, just like when he was 12. Washed his flannels, stocked his favorite coffee, and waited. That evening, I checked the mailbox and saw the first envelope with her name printed on it. The letter in the mailbox was a divorce packet. Neatly typed, no personal note, just a checklist of what Ivy believed she was owed. There was no mention of the money, no mention of the hours. Just furniture, the apartment lease, and a thin request for Eli to sign, when convenient. I waited until he was out on a walk to open my laptop. I hadn't looked at the numbers in weeks. The screen lit up slowly, as if reluctant to confirm what I already knew. I had wired over $18,000 in 4 months. Some went straight to the hospital, some to Ivy's supplemental treatments that were always in cash, always urgent. I never told Eli about the last transfer, or about the bracelet. It had been my mother's. thin gold, simple, with a tiny emerald set in the middle. She gave it to me the day I told her I was pregnant. I sold it quietly one afternoon when Eli was at the clinic with Ivy. The buyer was polite. He didn't ask questions, just counted the bills and left me with a folded receipt and a hollow wrist. Eli gave more than money. He sold his entire tool set, wrenches, Sanders the woodworking bench he built in college. His truck went next. After that, the savings account he'd started when they got engaged. All of it handed over without question. Because she was sick. Because he loved her. Because that's what good men do, right? But the part that knots my stomach isn't what she took. It's what I know he'd do again. If she walked through the door tomorrow and said, "I need you," he'd rise to meet her empty-handed but open-hearted. He still thinks love is enough. Still thinks sacrifice proves something. I turned off the laptop. The balance stared back for a second before fading to black. Outside, Eli's footsteps crunched the gravel. I could hear him talking to someone, but when I looked through the window, he was alone. The message came from Cheryl, a woman I hadn't worked with in years. We used to prep school lunches side by side. She always had gossip before the teachers did. Her text was short. "You've seen this," a link followed. I clicked it expecting some town drama, maybe something from the PTA. Instead, Ivy's face filled my screen. Her hair was done makeup perfect. One arm raised with a champagne flute, the other holding hands with a woman I didn't recognize. She looked radiant, not recovering. Radiant. The dress she wore shimmered in the light silk deep green with a low back and high price tag. Behind her, a skyline window and what looked like a new apartment. The caption read, "Healing is power. Time to rise." No mention of Eli, no sign of struggle, just curated beauty and tagged brands. I stared at it for a moment before walking the phone down the hall. Eli was on the porch, sipping from a chipped mug. I handed him the phone. He didn't flinch. Just watched the screen for a few seconds, thumbed through the stories. In another post, Ivy laughed with a group at a wine bar, then a slow pan of her new living room, complete with marble counters and velvet chairs. Eli exhaled through his nose. Quiet. No anger. "She looks good," he said finally. "Maybe it's what she needed." I waited for him to say more, to ask something, to feel betrayed. But he just handed the phone back and stood up. His shoulders were lower than before, as if each frame of her happiness had pressed him further into himself. He went to the shed not long after and started organizing the few tools he'd kept. I watched from the kitchen window, unsure if he was fixing something or just moving to stay upright. Later that evening, as I reached to turn off the porch light, I noticed headlights pull into the driveway. A man stepped out holding a folder. He looked up at the house, checked the address, and started walking toward the door. The knock came just before midnight, too firm to be an accident, too polite to be a threat. I opened the door halfway, the porch light casting a circle around a man in a wrinkled blazer, holding a folder pressed tight against his chest. "I'm looking for Eli Vance," he said. "Your son." His voice wavered, like someone not used to saying hard things out loud. "He's asleep," I said. "Who are you?" "My name is Reuben Wells," he replied. I was Ivy's accountant. "I need to talk to your son. It's about the donation funds. From when she was sick." My hand stayed on the doorframe steady. "You can talk to me." He hesitated, then nodded. "She raised more than she told him." "Much more." "Through separate links, private channels. She had me set them up. Told me it was all for her care." He opened the folder and flipped through neatly stacked pages. Bank transfers, account numbers, charts with totals that made my stomach turn. "She rerouted the donations. Some from your church. Others from online drives she asked her friends to post. I thought she was overwhelmed. I wanted to believe she was desperate, not dishonest." He looked down. I stopped working with her 2 months ago when she started making large withdrawals to a private investment account. He tapped one line on the sheet. This was the first payment, $2,500. It didn't go to a hospital. It went toward an interior design deposit. I stared at the numbers, then at him. Why are you here now? His jaw tightened. Because I couldn't sleep last night. Because I saw her post that video of the champagne party, and I knew your son was probably watching it too. I looked past him into the darkness, then stepped aside. Come in. He walked in quietly, like he knew this house wasn't built for men like him. I glanced down the hallway, where Eli's light still glowed beneath the door. Then I turned back to Reuben and said, "You'd better tell me everything." Reuben sat at the kitchen table like a man waiting for bad news he already knew was coming. I poured 2 cups of coffee, though it was so late the clock felt like it had stopped. He wrapped both hands around his mug, steadying himself before he spoke. Ivy didn't just exaggerate her expenses, he began. She fabricated them. He opened the folder again and slid a sheet toward me. It was a medical invoice stamped and itemized, except the hospital address didn't exist. The signature at the bottom belonged to no one. Another page showed pharmacy receipts with identical timestamps cut and pasted into place. Each lie was clean practiced. She created donation links under Eli's name, he continued. Said it would look more legitimate. Local drives, online fundraisers, church collections. She told people the insurance refused coverage and that she needed immediate help. I stared at line after line of deposits, all flowing into a private account Reuben circled with a trembling pen. This account, he said quietly, is hers alone. Why didn't you stop her? I asked. His shoulders sagged. At first I thought she was desperate. People do strange things when they're sick. She said the treatments were experimental and off-book. I believed her. But after she recovered, the withdrawals got larger. Spas, jewelry, a furniture deposit, that new apartment you saw online. He rubbed his eyes. I told her I couldn't be involved anymore. She told me I'd regret backing out. I pushed the folder aside and leaned back, letting the truth settle. This wasn't just selfishness. This was strategy, calculated. She had mapped out every step while my son was selling what little he had left. Reuben looked at me, almost pleading. I came because your son deserves to know, but I didn't want to blindside him, not tonight. He won't hear it yet, I said. Not like this. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The house creaked softly, the way old houses do when they know their walls are holding too much. I took a breath. Reuben, would you speak to a lawyer? His answer was a slow, solemn nod, and as he lifted his folder, headlights swept across the kitchen window. The next morning, I called Maureen. We hadn't spoken in years, not since her retirement party, when she swore she'd never look at another legal file again. But when I told her I had something serious, something that couldn't wait, she came over without hesitation. She brought a yellow legal pad, reading glasses, and the kind of silence that told me I didn't need to explain why I hadn't called sooner. We cleared the dining table and spread everything out. Reuben's documents, bank transfers, screenshots of Ivy's fundraiser pages, and a copy of the marriage license. She knew exactly what she was doing, Maureen said, flipping through a printout of donation deposits, multiple accounts, fake expenses, and using Eli's name as a front. That's fraud, plain and prosecutable. We didn't speak of Eli, not directly. We both knew what this would do to him if we weren't careful. I didn't want him drowning in shame on top of heartbreak. I just wanted the truth to live somewhere other than my kitchen table. So we worked quietly. Over 3 evenings, Maureen built a timeline. I printed screenshots from my phone, highlighted names and dollar amounts. She drafted a statement and organized it into a file thick enough to speak for itself. Meanwhile, Eli stayed busy helping repaint the bakery down the street. He came home with paint in his hair and new blisters on his hands. He told me it felt good to work again to fix something real. I nodded and smiled and folded his laundry in the evenings while Maureen reviewed Ivy's tax filings. When everything was ready, I slid the papers into a manila envelope, sealed it with clear tape, and drove to the post office before lunch. I didn't feel relief, not pride, just purpose. The woman behind the counter weighed the envelope and asked, "Anything fragile, perishable, or hazardous?" "Only to the guilty," I said. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't press. That afternoon, I watched Eli haul paint buckets into the bakery's back door. I stayed in the car until he disappeared inside, then turned the key in the ignition and drove home. It started with a headline on a local news blog: "Fundraising fraud allegations under review." No names at first, just quiet whispers in comment sections. But by afternoon, Ivy's name was tagged beneath every repost. Someone shared screenshots of the donation links. Another added her old apartment listing. By evening, it wasn't whispers anymore. The church posted a public statement, gentle but firm. They were grieved, looking into concerns and cooperating fully. A few members who had hosted fundraising dinners began commenting under Ivy's old posts. One woman wrote, "I gave $500 when she said she couldn't afford transportation. She picked it up in a rideshare black car." Then my phone rang. A number I didn't know. "This is Officer Denton with the state attorney's office," the voice said. "I'm calling to inform you that Ivy Vance has been summoned for questioning next Tuesday regarding the complaint filed last week." "I understand," I said calmly. "Thank you for the update." He paused before hanging up. "Just so you're aware, this may reach public channels. Things can move fast." I hung up and set the phone face down on the table. An hour later, Eli walked through the front door holding his phone like it was burning his hand. "Did you see this?" he asked, eyes wide. "It's everywhere. People are tagging Ivy saying she lied. There's even something from Pastor Neil." I nodded once and motioned for him to sit. He stayed standing. "She wouldn't. Not all of it's true." "Is it?" he asked. I met his eyes. "People talk? Truth travels?" He didn't press. He looked back at his phone, then set it down and rubbed the side of his face. "I just want this to be over," he said softly. He walked into the hallway, then stopped halfway down, lingering near the old coat rack. That night, after the lights were out and the house had gone quiet again, I pulled open the kitchen drawer and checked that the envelope receipt was still tucked beneath the scissors. It was. She showed up just before noon. No call, no warning. Just a knock at the door, small and slow, like someone hoping not to be heard. I opened it to find Ivy on the porch, shoulders hunched, cheeks hollow, her expensive coat wrinkled and hanging off her frame like it belonged to someone else. She didn't speak at first. Just stood there, eyes rimmed red. "Tell them to stop," she said eventually. "Please, I never meant to hurt anyone." Her voice cracked in the middle. It wasn't the voice I remembered, the polished charm, the curated sorrow. This one was frayed, scared, and maybe real in its own way. I stepped aside without a word. She hesitated, then entered the house like it was unfamiliar, like she'd never lived here, never laughed at this table, never opened our fridge and finished the last of the orange juice. Eli was in the kitchen rinsing a mug. He didn't turn around, but I knew he heard her. The sound of her name had been enough to still his hands for weeks. Her voice now made him freeze. I poured 2 cups of tea and placed them on the table. Ivy sat down, but didn't touch hers. "I just wanted to feel better," she said. "I wanted to survive and move on and not feel small anymore." "You didn't just hurt anyone," I said. "You drained the only person who ever believed in you." She looked down at her lap. "I didn't think he'd lose everything." I said nothing, let the silence hold her. Eli finally walked in, looked at her once, then turned away. He sat on the porch without a coat, staring out into the late autumn wind, like it might carry away whatever she had left behind. Ivy stood up. She left the tea untouched. At the door, she turned toward me one last time, but there was nothing left to say. When the door closed, I walked to the window and watched her disappear down the sidewalk. No car waited. No one followed. I turned back toward the hallway and heard the mail slot click open. The kitchen smells like cinnamon and clove. The bread is cooling on the counter, and Eli is laughing, really laughing for the first time in months. His sister's boys are climbing over him like puppies, tugging at his sleeves and demanding piggyback rides. Nora flew in from Portland 2 days ago, said it was time for a proper visit. She brought a suitcase full of hand-me-downs and a quiet look of relief when she saw her brother smile again. Eli's working now. Nothing big, just a few custom orders for wooden shelves and a hand-carved sign for the florist on Main. He's saving every bit, whispering about a small shop near the square with a window that catches morning light. He never asked how the headlines faded, how the investigation shifted, how Ivy ended up retreating from the very platforms she once lived on. He just knows it stopped, that no more letters came, that the whispers turned to silence, then disappeared. I never told him about the envelope, never said his name was cleared or that people called the house to apologize one by one. He didn't want that kind of closure. He wanted a clean table, a steady rhythm, the hum of a saw in the shed out back. The folder still lives in my drawer. Yellow tabs. Highlighted lines. The full story untouched. I haven't looked at it in weeks. This morning, I almost threw it out. But I didn't. Not out of fear, not even anger. Just something like memory. Like proof that I did what I had to when he couldn't bear to. I opened the window. Let the cool air drift through the house. The boys are setting up a game on the floor. Eli's slicing the bread, waving Nora over for coffee. Outside, leaves tumble across the sidewalk, soft and rustling like whispers finally finished. I pull off my apron and sit at the table. The breeze carries cinnamon through the room. And for the first time in a long time, nothing needs to be said.